I never thought that going to the park, something so simple and innocent, could lead to one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind that makes you want to be outside, feel the breeze, hear the birds, and just enjoy being a kid. My name is Aaliyah, and I'm 10 years old. I live in a small town where everybody knows everybody. At least, that's what they say. But on that day, I realized something very different. That sunny day turned dark really fast, not because of the clouds, but because of what happened to me. I was at the park with my friends, laughing, playing tag, just being kids. Then, out of nowhere, a police car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out. One of them, tall and with a stern face, looked directly at me. He shouted, "Hey you, stop right there." I froze. I didn't know what was happening. Was I in trouble? What did I do? Before I could think, the officer grabbed my arm. I was scared. I asked, "What did I do?" He didn't answer. He just said, "You're coming with me." Then, to my horror, he pulled out a pair of handcuffs. I screamed. "Please, I didn't do anything." My friends were crying. People at the park started gathering around. Someone shouted, "She's just a kid." But the officer didn't stop. He put the cold, metal cuffs on my wrists. They were too big for me. They slid down to my hands, cutting into my skin. Tears ran down my face. I kept asking, "Why are you doing this?" But no one answered. The other officer looked uncomfortable. He kept glancing around at the crowd. He whispered something to the officer holding me. But the tall officer ignored him. He pulled me toward the car. I was shaking. I had never even been close to a police car, and now I was being shoved into one. The ride to the station felt like forever. I kept thinking, where's my mom? Why isn't anyone helping me? At the station, they put me in a small room. It was cold. There was a metal chair and a table. They left me there alone. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the door opened. A lady walked in. She looked kind. She said, "Sweetie, do you know why you're here?" I shook my head. "No," I said. She looked at the file in her hands. She frowned. There was a report of a young girl stealing from a store nearby. You matched the description. I was shocked. Stealing? I didn't steal anything. I was at the park the whole time. She nodded slowly. I believe you. We're looking into it now. After a while, my mom came. She looked worried, angry, scared all at once. She hugged me tight. "Don't worry baby, I'm here now." I cried in her arms. Eventually, they let us go. They said it was a mistake. A mistake. But the damage was done. Back at school, kids whispered. Some were kind. Others weren't. They called me a criminal. Said I must have done something wrong. Even some teachers looked at me differently. The town that once felt so small and safe now felt big and cold. But then something happened. A video. Someone had recorded the whole thing at the park. It went viral. People were angry. Not just in our town, but everywhere. They saw what happened to me, a 10-year-old girl, handcuffed for no reason. Protests started. People marched, held signs. They chanted my name. Aaliyah deserves justice. My story was on the news. Reporters came to our house. Some people tried to defend the officer. They said he was just doing his job. But most people knew the truth. It wasn't just a mistake. It was racism. Plain and simple. The officer was suspended. An investigation was started. More stories came out. Turns out, I wasn't the only one. Other kids, other families, had faced similar things. Our town started to change. People began talking, really talking, about racism, about justice, about change. I spoke at a town meeting. My voice shook, but I spoke. I said, I'm just a kid. I want to play, to laugh, to be safe. I shouldn't have to be scared of the people who are supposed to protect me. People clapped. Some cried. Today, things are better. Not perfect, but better. There are new rules, new training for officers. My school has programs about kindness and respect. And me? I'm still healing. But I'm strong. Stronger than I ever thought I could be. This wasn't just my story. It became a movement. A call for change. And I know that, no matter what, I'll never stop speaking up. Not just for me, but for every kid who's ever been treated unfairly. Because we all deserve to be seen, to be heard, and to be safe. Always that it all started with a call. Suspicious activity, they said. A young girl, black, maybe 10 years old, seen near a store where a theft had occurred. No evidence. No clear description. Just fear, bias, and a quick decision. Officer Daniels, a man with 15 years on the force, responded. He was known for being strict. Some said fair. Others said otherwise. When he arrived at the park, he already had an idea in his mind. He saw Aaliyah. Playing. Laughing. He didn't see a child. He saw a suspect. He didn't ask questions. He acted. Handcuffs. A police car. Tears. The whole town watched. Some turned away. Others pulled out their phones. The footage showed everything. A little girl. Terrified. Her arms pulled behind her back. Her voice shaking. Saying, please. I didn't do anything. Over and over. But Officer Daniels didn't stop. He didn't listen. That night, the video hit the internet. Views skyrocketed. People commented, shared, demanded answers. The mayor held a press conference. We are investigating. But that wasn't enough. Not anymore. Aaliyah's mother, Denise, was fierce. She spoke with calm anger. My daughter is 10. She was playing at a park. Now she's afraid to go outside. News channels replayed the footage again and again. Talk shows discussed it. Was it racism? Was it poor judgment? Was it both? Across the country, people weighed in. Some said, this is exactly what we mean when we talk about systemic racism. Others said, it's an isolated incident. But the truth was louder than opinion. A child had been handcuffed. Unjustly. Soon, activists arrived. Not from the big cities, but local. Mothers. Teachers. Retired folks. They held signs, justice for Aaliyah. Protect our kids. Stop criminalizing childhood. Officer Daniels was placed on administrative leave. The police chief, under pressure, spoke briefly. We take this seriously. We are reviewing protocols. But to many, it sounded hollow. Meanwhile, Aaliyah struggled. She woke up crying. She wouldn't go near the park. Her laughter was gone. Therapists visited. Counselors offered help. But how do you undo trauma like that? Her friends stuck by her. Some didn't understand. Others were scared. What if it happens to me, one boy asked. That question lingered. It echoed in classrooms, churches, homes. What if it happens again? Denise joined forces with other parents. They formed a group, Safe Childhood. They demanded body cams. Community review boards. De-escalation training. The town council met weekly. Meetings overflowed. Residents, black and white, stood up. Told stories. Demanded change. Some officials pushed back. Let's not jump to conclusions, they said. But the crowd didn't back down. At one meeting, Aaliyah spoke again. She wore a yellow dress. Her voice was soft, but steady. I used to think police were heroes. Now, I don't know. But I still believe people can be kind. I want to believe that. Silence filled the room. Then applause. Change didn't happen overnight. But it began. The town approved funding for youth programs. Police had to attend racial bias training. A citizens' oversight committee was formed. And Officer Daniels? He resigned. No charges were filed. But his career was over. Some people protested that. Said he was being made a scapegoat. But others knew better. They knew it wasn't just about one officer. It was about a culture. A mindset. A history. One that needed to be dismantled. Aaliyah's story was featured in documentaries. She met other kids who'd faced similar things. Together, they laughed. They cried. They stood up. They held hands at rallies. They said, never again. And the town? It changed. Slowly. But meaningfully. Conversations that had been avoided were now held openly. Books were read. Panels were hosted. Students created art projects. One mural showed Aaliyah, standing tall, hands free, a smile on her face. Underneath it said, "Let kids be kids." Years passed. Aaliyah grew older. She didn't forget. But she also didn't let it define her. She wanted to be a teacher. She said, "I want kids to feel safe, to learn, to grow without fear." Her mom smiled. "You already teach us so much, baby." In the end, Aaliyah became more than a headline. She became a voice. A symbol. A reminder that change is possible, but only if we're brave enough to face the truth. To listen. To act. And to protect the innocence that every child deserves. Sometimes, change starts with a whisper. A quiet voice that says, "This isn't right." Then, others hear it. And it grows. Into a conversation. A protest. A movement. In the weeks that followed Aaliyah's arrest, something shifted. Local newspapers ran headlines that never would have seen print before. Town questions police tactics. Community demands justice for Aaliyah. Even national outlets picked up the story. Churches opened their doors for community meetings. Schools invited speakers to talk about race and justice. Teenagers led marches. They carried homemade signs. One said, "My skin is not a crime." Another, "Am I next?" Aaliyah's story became part of something bigger. Not just about her. Not just about one town. But about how quickly innocence can be taken, and how hard it is to restore it. Denise continued speaking. She was no longer just a mom. She was an advocate. She sat on panels. She gave interviews. She reminded everyone that the fight wasn't over. Not even close. "Today, it was my daughter," she said. "Tomorrow, it could be yours." Her words weren't threats. They were truths. The local police department changed their policies. No more handcuffing children under 13 unless there was clear and present danger. Officers were required to complete bias and empathy training twice a year. And most importantly, an independent oversight committee was established. Some people called it progress. Others called it pressure. But for Aaliyah, it was something else entirely. A chance to breathe again. A chance to be a child again. She started drawing again. At first, it was dark images. Storms. Frowns. Tears. But slowly, the colors came back. Sunshine. Butterflies. Friends. One drawing showed a police officer holding hands with a little girl. She showed it to her mom. Denise smiled. Do you think that's possible? Aaliyah nodded. If they try. At school, she joined the debate team. Her first topic, how can communities build trust with law enforcement? She stood tall. Spoke clearly. And when she finished, her classmates clapped. She wasn't the same girl from the park. She was stronger now. Braver. But she still loved hopscotch. Still laughed at silly jokes. Still ran in the grass with her friends. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to carry the past without letting it crush you. And Aaliyah was learning that. Officer Daniels moved away. Some say he found a job in another state. Others say he retired early. No one really knows. But his absence was noted. And in that space, something new took root. Accountability. The new police chief was different. Younger. More willing to listen. She met with community leaders regularly. Asked hard questions. Invited criticism. It wasn't perfect. But it was a start. At one town event, she spoke directly to the crowd. I can't undo what was done. But I can promise you this. We are listening. We are learning. We will do better. Aaliyah watched from the front row. She squeezed her mom's hand. Maybe this time, they meant it. The mural downtown became a landmark. Tourists stopped to take pictures. But for the townspeople, it was more than art. It was a promise. To remember. To change. To grow. Each year, on the anniversary of the incident, the town held a day of reflection. Workshops. Speakers. Story circles. Not to dwell in sadness. But to remind everyone how far they'd come, and how far they still had to go. And each year, Aaliyah spoke. She never read from notes. She spoke from her heart. One year, she said. I used to think being brave meant not being scared. But now I know being brave means doing the right thing, even when you are scared. People stood to applaud. The children in the crowd looked up to her. Some wore shirts with her name. Others drew pictures of her. To them, she was more than a girl in a story. She was a hero. But Aaliyah never let it go to her head. She still helped her mom with groceries. Still cleaned her room. Still argued about bedtime. Because being a hero didn't mean being perfect. It meant being real. One afternoon, a new girl came to her school. Shy. Nervous. She sat alone at lunch. Aaliyah walked over. Hi, I'm Aaliyah. Want to sit with us? The girl smiled. Sure. Small kindnesses. That's where healing grows. Years later, when Aaliyah was asked what she remembered most about that day, she paused. Not the cuffs. Not the cold chair at the station. Not even the fear. What she remembered most was her mom's hug. Tight. Warm. Safe. She said, that's what saved me. We often think heroes wear capes. But sometimes, they wear yellow dresses. Sometimes, they speak softly. Sometimes, they cry and still stand tall. Sometimes, they're just kids who refuse to be broken. And when we listen to them, really listen, we realize they're not just telling their stories. They're changing ours. Years passed. But the memory never faded. Not for Aaliyah. Not for her town. Not for anyone who had seen that video, heard that story, felt that moment of injustice. And still, the world kept changing. New headlines. New tragedies. New voices rising. But Aaliyah's name continued to be spoken. As a reminder. As a symbol. As a beginning. In law school, she was top of her class. She focused on juvenile justice. On police accountability. On constitutional law. Every case she read, every argument she studied, came back to one thing: children deserve to feel safe. Her classmates called her the advocate. She didn't mind. Because that's what she was. Not just in theory. But in practice. Every paper she wrote. Every mock trial she stood in. She brought her fire. In one class, a professor posed a hypothetical. A child, age 10, is detained under suspicion. What's the appropriate use of force? Aaliyah raised her hand. None. The professor smiled. Care to elaborate? She stood. When we treat children like threats, we teach them to fear authority. We break trust before it begins. And that damage echoes into adulthood. The room was silent. Then came applause. She wasn't there to impress. She was there to build. A better future. A safer system. During a summer internship, she worked on a bill aimed at banning the handcuffing of minors under 12 except in extreme cases. Her personal testimony was part of the hearing. She stood before lawmakers, calm and composed. Told her story not for sympathy, but for impact. And when the vote came, it passed. Unanimously. Her mom sat in the gallery. Tears in her eyes. Pride in her heart. After graduation, Aaliyah returned home. Not just to visit. To stay. To serve. She opened a legal clinic. Focused on helping families navigate school discipline, police interactions, and youth rights. It was small at first. One room. A desk. A borrowed printer. But word spread. Families came. Volunteers offered time. Donors supported the mission. And before long, the clinic became a cornerstone of the community. She didn't wear suits every day. She didn't drive a fancy car. But she made change. One case at a time. One child at a time. One voice at a time. She trained school staff on de-escalation. Held seminars on kids' legal rights. Partnered with local police to create new response protocols. And every year, she hosted a youth justice summit in her town. Where kids spoke. Adults listened. And change felt possible. The mural downtown was expanded again. Now it showed kids in a classroom. In a courtroom. On a playground. Smiling. Together. Safe. And in the center, Aaliyah. Older now. But still strong. Still leading. Reporters still called sometimes. Asked her to speak on national news. She did, but sparingly. I don't want to be the story, she'd say. I want to help others tell theirs. Because Aaliyah understood something powerful. That the most lasting change doesn't come from the spotlight. It comes from the ground. From real people. Doing real work. Every day. At the clinic, a mother once hugged her, crying. You helped my son when no one else would. Thank you. Aaliyah hugged her back. You're welcome. He's got a bright future. And he did. There were hard days. Cases that didn't go her way. Calls that haunted her. Stories too painful to repeat. But she never gave up. Because she knew what was at stake. One night, after a long day, she walked past the mural. A little girl was standing there. Looking up. Aaliyah stopped. The girl turned. Are you her? Aaliyah smiled. Yes. The girl nodded. My mom said you changed everything. Aaliyah knelt down. I tried. But there's still more to do. The girl asked. Can I help? Yes, Aaliyah said. Start by being kind. And never be afraid to speak up. That was the legacy. Not fame. Not titles. But action. Inspiration. Change. When people asked what she hoped for the future, Aaliyah would say, I hope one day, no child has to be brave like I was. I hope their courage can be spent on dreams, not survival. Because she never forgot that day. Not the cuffs. Not the fear. But what came after. The rise. The movement. The transformation. It's not the pain that defines us. It's what we do with it. And Aaliyah? She turned pain into purpose. Fear into fire. And silence into a voice that never stopped speaking. And because of her, a town was changed. A state was reformed. A nation was reminded. That children deserve protection. That justice begins with listening. And that even the smallest voice can carry the weight of a revolution. Aaliyah's work didn't stop at her town's borders. Soon, she was invited to sit on state task forces. To advise on national panels. She consulted with departments looking to retrain their officers. Rewrote curriculum to reflect empathy, understanding, and de-escalation. She still carried her story. But it no longer defined her. It empowered her. And through her journey, she remained humble. Every child who came to her clinic received her full attention. Every family was met with patience and respect. Because she remembered. She remembered being 10. She remembered the cuffs. The questions. The cold. The humiliation. And she swore that no one else would feel that alone, not on her watch. A school counselor once asked. How do you keep going? Aaliyah paused. I have to. Because if I don't, who will? She spoke at universities. Taught part-time at her alma mater. Her classes always filled. Not because of her fame. But because of her fire. Students said she didn't just teach law. She taught humanity. And when she walked into a courtroom, people paid attention. Not to her suit. Not to her credentials. But to her presence. Because Aaliyah commanded respect. Not with volume. But with truth. On the 10th anniversary of the incident, the town held a vigil. Not just to remember what happened. But to celebrate how far they'd come. The mayor spoke. The police chief spoke. Then, Aaliyah took the stage. She looked out at the crowd, families, teachers, students, friends. She said. I was once just a kid walking home. Now, I'm here, standing with all of you. And together, we've shown that no moment, no mistake, no injustice is too big to overcome. We've built bridges. We've broken silence. We've turned shame into strength. People clapped. Some cried. Some held candles. And in that glow, Aaliyah stood tall. Not as a victim. Not even just a survivor. But as a leader. A healer. A force. After the vigil, a young boy ran up to her. He had a notebook. Asked for her autograph. She smiled. Wrote her name. And added. Use your voice. It matters. Because that's what she wanted kids to know. That their voices mattered. That silence was not safety. That speaking up wasn't just brave, it was necessary. Years continued to pass. Aaliyah's name appeared in textbooks. Her case was studied in law classes. Her strategies were modeled by school districts across the country. But she never stopped listening. She never stopped learning. Every child she met brought a new lesson. Every case she fought reminded her why she started. Once, a reporter asked, "What's your proudest accomplishment?" She thought for a moment. Then said, "That a kid can walk into my clinic and feel safe. That's everything." Because that's what she never had. Safety. Understanding. A chance to just be a child. And that's what she gave to others. In her office, she kept a photo of herself at 10. Next to it, a sticky note. Keep going. That was her mantra. Through exhaustion. Through setbacks. Through heartbreak. She kept going. Because justice isn't a moment. It's a movement. A practice. A promise. And Aaliyah kept that promise. She helped pass new laws. Laws that banned aggressive tactics on children. Laws that required body cams in schools. Laws that mandated child psychologists during juvenile interviews. Each victory was hard-won. Each one mattered. She partnered with organizations nationwide. Spoke at summits. Built networks. Created resources. And trained the next generation of advocates. And though she had every right to move on, to leave the past behind, she stayed. She stayed rooted. Because that's where the work was. On the ground. With the people. One day, she returned to her old elementary school. The principal welcomed her. The students lined the halls. And when she entered the gym, it erupted in cheers. She looked around. Same walls. Same floor. New hope. She gave a short speech. Then sat on the floor with the kids. Answered their questions. Laughed with them. Listened. And when one asked, "Were you scared?" she said, "Yes. But being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. And courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing anyway." That day, the school named their library after her. The Aaliyah Johnson Library for Justice and Learning. Inside, the shelves held books about heroes. And in the center, a photo of Aaliyah. Smiling. Confident. Home. She visited often. Sometimes just to read to the kids. Sometimes just to remember. Because no matter how far she went, how high she climbed, she never forgot where she started. Not in anger. Not in bitterness. But in purpose. Because everything she'd been through, every headline, every fight, every tear, led to this. To impact. To legacy. And it all started with a little girl walking years later. A filmmaker reached out. Wanted to make a documentary. Not just about Aaliyah's case. But about what came after. The ripple. The change. The movement. At first, Aaliyah hesitated. She didn't seek attention. She didn't want to be the focus. But then she thought about the kids. The ones who still didn't know their rights. The ones who still felt alone. So she said yes. The film followed her work. Her conversations. Her moments of doubt. Her triumphs. And it told the truth. Not just the pain. But the purpose. It premiered at a local theater. Families came. Teachers. Officers. Lawyers. Children. And when the lights dimmed, and the screen lit up with her story, there was silence. Then tears. Then applause. After the credits rolled, Aaliyah stood up. She didn't give a speech. She simply said, "This is not just my story. It's ours." The film was nominated for awards. Won some. Got national recognition. But Aaliyah stayed grounded. She used the platform to expand her clinic. Launch new programs. Train more youth leaders. Her favorite initiative? A summer camp for kids interested in law and justice. They learned about their rights. Visited courts. Met lawyers and judges. And every Friday, they shared their own stories. In a safe space. With open hearts. One camper said, "I didn't know I could make a difference. Now I do." That was the mission. That was the point. One morning, Aaliyah received a letter. No return address. Just her name. Inside was a note. "You helped my son. You didn't know it. But you did. Thank you." She kept it in her drawer. Next to the photo. Next to the sticky note. Keep going. Because every reminder mattered. Every message gave her strength. And still, she faced resistance. Old systems die hard. Not everyone welcomed change. Some pushed back. Some ignored her. Some mocked. But she didn't stop. She didn't flinch. Because she had truth on her side. And the truth was louder than hate. Stronger than denial. She testified in Congress. Sat across from skeptics. Told them what it felt like to be 10 years old and handcuffed. Not to shame them. But to awaken them. Some listened. Some didn't. But her voice was recorded. Archived. Preserved. So that no one could say, "We didn't know." And eventually, laws changed. National guidelines were adopted. Training manuals were rewritten. And it all traced back to one moment. One injustice. One girl. She became a reference point. A citation. A name in bold. But to her town. To her family. To the children she mentored. She was just Aaliyah. The one who stood. The one who spoke. The one who stayed. One winter, the clinic held a celebration. 10 years of service. 10 years of justice. 10 years of hope. Alumni came. Kids who'd once needed help now thriving. One was a law student. Another, a teacher. One had joined the city council. They shared stories. Laughed. Cried. And Aaliyah listened. Heart full. Eyes bright. Because this was her legacy. Not statues. Not speeches. But people. Better. Stronger. Heard. And in that room. You could feel it. The shift. The impact. The power. Years later, Aaliyah wrote a book. Titled, The Walk Home. It wasn't about blame. Or rage. It was about transformation. It told her story. But it told others too. And when it hit shelves, it became a bestseller. Not for drama. But for truth. Book clubs read it. Teachers assigned it. Parents shared it. Kids underlined it. And in the margins, readers wrote their own reflections. Their own stories. Their own truths. Because that's what Aaliyah did. She opened the door. And let others step through. She never forgot the officer. She never hated him. She just hoped he learned. Grew. Changed. Once, she saw him. At a community event. Older now. Quiet. He walked up. Said nothing. Just nodded. She nodded back. And that was enough. Because sometimes, change doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with humility. Acknowledgement. A quiet moment of understanding. And that, too, is justice. Time moved forward. But Aaliyah's pace never slowed. She kept showing up. For meetings. For protests. For vigils. For students. For families. She didn't just lead. She walked beside. At community forums. She didn't speak first. She listened. Took notes. Then spoke. And when she did, people leaned in. Because her words weren't rehearsed. They were real. Rooted. Resonant. One evening, during a town hall, a young mother stood up. Tears in her eyes. My son was profiled last week. He's only 8. What do I do? Aaliyah didn't offer a lecture. She walked over. Held the mother's hand. Said. We fight together. Because this wasn't about speeches. It was about solidarity. She helped organize legal clinics. Free workshops. Know Your Rights sessions. Therapy groups. Each one packed. Each one needed. And still, she made time for joy. For music. For dance. For laughter. Because healing requires light. Not just truth. But joy. She told her staff. We can't pour from an empty cup. So take care of yourselves. Then take care of the world. That's the balance she struck. Fire and grace. Strength and softness. Justice and joy. A national magazine named her among the most influential women of the decade. She was honored. But more than that, she was focused. Not on accolades. But on outcomes. She said in an interview. Influence without impact is empty. I want change, not just credit. And she meant it. She took her earnings from the book. From the film. From the speaking engagements. And invested it. Into scholarships. Into mental health resources. Into youth centers. Because for Aaliyah, success meant others rising too. At her clinic, she created a new mural. It showed a little girl standing tall. Facing a wall. Cracking it open with her voice. Above it read. Break the silence. Build the future. Kids loved it. They took selfies with it. They asked about it. And every time, Aaliyah would smile and say, that wall. That's the fear. The doubt. The injustice. And your voice. That's the hammer. Because that's what she believed. Voices mattered. Stories mattered. Once, a boy who rarely spoke came to her office. He looked at the photo of 10-year-old Aaliyah. Then whispered. If you did it, maybe I can too. She knelt down. Looked him in the eye. Said. You absolutely can. And in that moment, he believed her. Because she didn't speak from theory. She spoke from experience. She knew what it meant to be afraid. To feel powerless. To be underestimated. And she turned that pain into purpose. She launched a podcast. Called it Uncuffed. It featured voices of those once silenced. Formerly incarcerated youth. Wrongfully accused children. Activists. Artists. Mothers. Fathers. Each episode raw. Real. Revealing. It climbed the charts. Not for controversy. But for connection. Listeners wrote in. Said. I never understood. Now I do. I thought I was alone. Now I'm not. That was the power. Not of volume. But of vulnerability. Aaliyah always said. True change starts with listening. And people listened. She trained educators. Wrote curriculum for middle schools. Led roundtables with law enforcement. And at every table, she asked the same question. What would have helped 10-year-old me? Then built the answer. She didn't just reform systems. She reimagined them. With care. With creativity. With courage. And across the country, others followed her lead. New clinics opened. Modeled after hers. New laws passed. Inspired by her advocacy. New generations rose. Empowered by her story. One day, a young girl sent her a drawing. It showed a caped superhero. Brown skin. Curly hair. Glasses. Labeled, Justice Girl. Aaliyah framed it. Hung it beside her degree. Because in many ways, that's who she was. Justice Girl. Not with powers. But with purpose. Not with flight. But with fight. She kept journals. Every night. She'd write one sentence. What did I do today to make it better? Some days the answers were big. A speech. A lawsuit. A win. Some days they were small. A hug. A smile. A text. But each one counted. Each one mattered. Because justice isn't just policy. It's practice. It's people. It's persistence. And Aaliyah persisted, years into her journey. Aaliyah received an unexpected call. A school board from another state. They were in crisis. An incident had occurred. A child wrongfully detained. They needed help. Guidance. Clarity. She flew out the next day. Met with parents. Teachers. Officials. Kids. She didn't arrive with judgment. She arrived with empathy. And after 3 days, the district announced a complete policy overhaul. Training. Oversight. Support. One mother cried. This could have been my son. Thank you for coming. Aaliyah hugged her. Said. This is what we do. We show up. We fix what's broken. She returned home exhausted. But fulfilled. Because every place she went, a seed was planted. And one by one, they grew. At conferences, she didn't just keynote. She asked questions. Challenged assumptions. Encouraged dialogue. She told the crowd. If you're here for a hashtag, leave. If you're here for the hard work, stay. And they stayed. She mentored interns. Most were students of color. Many had faced discrimination. All looked up to her. One said, you don't just talk about justice. You are justice. But Aaliyah always redirected praise. It's not me. It's us. Because her fight was collective. Inclusive. Ongoing. She hosted town workshops titled, From Hurt to Healing. Invited people from all sides. Victims. Officers. Educators. It wasn't easy. It wasn't always smooth. But it was necessary. And slowly, walls came down. Stories were shared. Progress was made. A retired officer said, I was part of the problem. Now, I want to be part of the solution. Aaliyah nodded. That's all she needed. Willingness. Accountability. She believed people could change. Because she had. From silence to voice. From fear to power. One autumn, she stood on a college campus. Giving a lecture. Students filled every seat. She asked them, what will you do with your story? Because that's where it begins. With story. With truth. With courage. And when one student said, "I'm scared no one will listen," she replied, "Speak anyway. The right people will hear you." She believed in the ripple effect. One voice. Then another. Then another. And soon. A wave. At home. She lived simply. No mansion. No staff. Just her. Her books. Her journals. Her plants. Peace. She took walks every morning. Cleared her mind. Listened to birds. Reflected. Sometimes. She passed her old school. Paused. Smiled. Not in sadness. In gratitude. Because from that hallway, a movement was born. She never sought revenge. She sought reform. Never acted in bitterness. Only in purpose. And when asked how she stayed grounded, she said, "By remembering who I was. Before the world tried to tell me who to be." She believed in boundaries. Protected her rest. Cherished her family. Her parents. Still proud. Still supportive. Still her foundation. They attended her events. Sat in the front row. Cried often. And when people thanked them, they always said, "She did this." We just stood beside her. Aaliyah launched a fellowship. Named after young victims of injustice. It funded students pursuing law. Mental health. Education. Policy. She called them the torchbearers. Because the light must continue. And she wrote letters to each one. Personal. Encouraging. Powerful. One letter read, "The world may not be ready. Be brave anyway." Another. "Your existence is resistance. Shine on." Her words lingered. Her influence deepened. When media tried to turn her into a symbol, she redirected the narrative. "I'm not an icon. I'm a person. Doing the work." Because that's what mattered. The work. Not the spotlight. She visited prisons. Sat with young people. Listened to their stories. Told them they were more than their mistakes. And when one asked, "Do you think I'm redeemable?" she said, "You were never beyond redemption." Hope. She gave them hope. Not false. Not naive. But real. Rooted in compassion. And across the country, others followed her lead. Started clinics. Built networks. Changed lives. Her name became a verb. To Aaliyah, something. To fight with grace. To lead with heart. To speak with truth. And she laughed when she heard it. Said, "If that's what I'm known for, I'll take it." Because legacy isn't in titles. It's in impact. It's in lives changed. It's in ripples turned to waves.